There is something about pulling into a drive-in restaurant in the 1960s that anyone who experienced it never forgets. The neon lights glowing against the evening sky, the crackle of the speaker box, the sight of a car hop approaching with a tray of food. People who ate at one of these places during their heyday know exactly why drive-ins became such an iconic part of American life. This was a time when the car was king, and restaurants were designed around that reality. Drive-ins were not just places to eat. They were social hubs, date destinations, and teenage hangouts all rolled into one. The chrome, the colors, and the carefully choreographed service created an experience that fast food chains would spend decades trying to replicate, but never quite match. This was the golden age of the American drive-in. It was before the drive-through window changed everything. It was before eating in your car meant grabbing a bag and rushing somewhere else. Let's walk through what it actually felt like to eat at one of these remarkable places. Some of this might bring back memories. Some of it might explain why people still get nostalgic for an era of dining that has largely disappeared. Let's step into that world. Arriving at a drive-in restaurant in the 1960s was an experience from the moment the parking lot came into view. The architecture alone announced that this was somewhere special. These buildings were designed to be noticed. They had soaring roof lines that jutted toward the sky at dramatic angles. Massive neon signs could be seen from blocks away. Color schemes of bright red, turquoise, and gleaming white practically vibrated under the California sun, or under the glow of the parking lot lights at night. The parking lot was arranged in a distinctive pattern. Angled stalls faced the central building, each space marked clearly so cars would line up in neat rows. Metal posts stood at each parking spot, topped with speaker boxes and illuminated menu boards. Some drive-ins had canopies stretching over the parking area, providing shade during hot afternoons. The whole layout was engineered for automobile convenience in a way that felt futuristic. Pulling into a stall and turning off the engine began the ritual. The menu board glowed beside the car window, listing items with prices that seem almost impossible now. A hamburger for 30 cents, a basket of fries for a quarter, a thick milkshake for 40 cents. These were not small portions either. The food was substantial and made fresh. The speaker box was mounted on a pole that could be adjusted to reach the driver's window. Pressing the button to place an order felt like using advanced technology. A voice would crackle through, often distorted but friendly, asking what the car wanted. Families would shout their orders across the seats. Teenagers would lean over each other to add items. The whole car participated in the ordering process. Then came the wait, but it was never boring. Drive-ins were designed for watching. You could see other cars pulling in and out, car hops moving between vehicles, friends spotting each other across the lot and waving. The parking lot was a social space where the community gathered without ever leaving their vehicles. The car hops defined the drive-in experience. These were usually young women, though some establishments employed young men as well. They wore uniforms that matched the restaurant's color scheme: crisp blouses, short skirts or fitted pants, and sometimes roller skates that let them glide between cars with remarkable speed. The skating car hops became iconic images of the era. When the food was ready, the car hop would emerge from the building carrying a large metal tray. Watching them navigate the parking lot, balancing heavy trays loaded with food and drinks, was impressive. They moved with practiced efficiency, somehow keeping everything level while walking or skating across uneven pavement. The tray hooked onto the car's window, which had been rolled down in anticipation. The window tray became a table. The car hop would arrange the food, hand out napkins, and make sure everything was correct. Tips were expected and appreciated. Good car hops remembered regular customers, knew their usual orders, and provided the kind of personal service that made people feel valued. Before we continue with the food and culture that made these places so beloved, if you are enjoying this look back at how Americans really lived and want to explore more decades and experiences from the past, consider subscribing. There are so many more stories about the way life used to be. The food at a 1960s drive-in was simple but satisfying in ways that modern fast food rarely achieves. Hamburgers were the centerpiece. These were not thin patties assembled on an industrial line. The beef was often ground fresh, formed into substantial patties, and cooked on flat-top grills where they could develop a proper crust. The buns were soft and frequently toasted with butter. Toppings were straightforward: lettuce, tomato, onion, pickles, ketchup, mustard, and maybe a special sauce each drive-in claimed as its own secret recipe. Cheese was American, melted properly over the patty. The whole thing was wrapped in paper and arrived warm, the wrapper slightly translucent from the grease in the best possible way. French fries came in paper-lined baskets or cardboard boats. These were real potatoes, often cut on the premises, fried until golden and crispy on the outside while remaining fluffy inside. Salt was applied generously. The fries were meant to be eaten immediately while still hot. Trying to save them for later was pointless. They were perfect in that moment, and that moment only. Milkshakes and malts were thick enough to require effort to drink through a straw. Ice cream, milk, and flavoring blended until rich and creamy. Chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry were standard, and some places offered more exotic flavors. The shakes came in tall glasses, often with extra in a metal mixing cup on the side. Drinking a shake while eating fries, alternating between cold and sweet and hot and salty, became one of those simple pleasures that defined American casual dining. Onion rings, hot dogs, corn dogs, and various regional specialties rounded out menus. Root beer floats were popular, served in frosted glass mugs at some establishments. The root beer was often house-made, with that distinctive bite that commercial versions cannot replicate. Cherry Cokes and other fountain drinks were mixed by hand to order. Drive-ins served as teenage social headquarters in a way that is hard to overstate. For young people in the 1960s, the drive-in offered something precious. It was a place to gather that was public enough to be acceptable, but private enough to feel like their own. Parents knew where their kids were. Teenagers had autonomy within that space. Friday and Saturday nights transformed drive-in parking lots into scenes of controlled chaos. Cars full of teenagers would circle the lot slowly, a ritual called cruising that allowed everyone to see and be seen. Finding a parking spot meant joining the social scene. Conversations happened between cars. Music played from car radios. Romances often began in those parking lots. For dating couples, the drive-in offered a perfect middle ground. It was public enough to satisfy parental concerns, yet it offered the privacy of the car interior. Couples shared a basket of fries across the front seat, split a milkshake with 2 straws, and talked for hours while the parking lot hummed with activity around them. These were formative experiences for a generation. The drive-in also served families with young children. Before car seats and safety regulations made traveling with kids complicated, families would pile into station wagons and head to the drive-in for an easy dinner. Children could be messy without anyone caring, spilled drinks and dropped fries, stayed in the car rather than on restaurant floors. Parents could relax, knowing their kids were contained and entertained. The drive-in represented something larger about American culture in the 1960s. The automobile had become the center of American life, and businesses adapted. Drive-in movies, drive-in banks, drive-in churches even appeared. The drive-in restaurant was the most successful expression of this car-centered lifestyle. It combined American love of automobiles with American love of casual dining in a way that felt natural and exciting. The efficiency was part of the appeal. No parking the car and walking inside. No waiting for a table. No flagging down a server for the check. The drive-in streamlined the restaurant experience for people on the go, but it did so without sacrificing quality or service. The food was made fresh. The car hops provided personal attention. The experience was both faster and more pleasant than traditional dining. By the end of the 1960s, the drive-in era was already beginning to fade. The fast food chains that would dominate American dining were expanding rapidly. Drive-through windows offered even greater speed and convenience. Labor costs made car hop service increasingly expensive. The social changes of the late 1960s and the early 1970s transformed teenage culture. What defined the 1960s drive-in was the combination of novelty and comfort. These places felt modern and exciting, while also feeling familiar and welcoming. The neon lights promised something special. The car hops delivered friendly service. The food satisfied in simple, honest ways. The parking lot created community. For those who experienced eating at a drive-in during its golden age, the memories remain vivid. The taste of a fresh burger and hot fries. The condensation on a frosted mug of root beer. The sight of car hops skating between cars as the sun set behind the glowing sign. It was more than just a meal. It was a distinctly American experience that captured a moment when optimism, automobile culture, and simple pleasures combined into something memorable. For those with memories of this remarkable era in American dining, there is always more history to explore.